A Navy SEAL is in his remote cabin amidst a blizzard when he suddenly hears a knock at the door. When he opens it, a surprising sight appears before his eyes. It is a little girl with 5 German Shepherd dogs, but the terrifying thing is what the girl says next. Typhoon number 7 did not knock and ask permission. It tore through the borderlands night with nature's savagery, turning the ancient forest into a massive, watery grave. Inside the wooden cabin perched precariously on the hillside, Thomas Graves, the man the locals called Tom, the Tin Soldier, sat facing a cheap bottle of liquor. 45 years old, his eyes were as ancient as the moss clinging to the cliffs. He drank not to get drunk, but to forget the sound of gunfire years ago and the image of Radar, the service dog that had shielded him from a fatal bullet. 5 years. Tom had lived like a hollow shell, vowing never to touch a gun again and absolutely never to let another dog into his life. But fate is a cruel jester. It always finds you when you most want to run. Amidst the roar of thunder, there was a frantic scratching at the oak door. It wasn't the wind, nor was it a stray wild animal. It was the sound of desperation. Tom frowned, his calloused hand instinctively snatching the dagger on the table before unlatching the door. The door burst open. The wind swept in, bringing bone-chilling cold and a bizarre scene. Standing there was not a ghost, but a girl of about 7, soaked to the bone, her lips blue and trembling. But what stunned the former soldier were the 5 towering black shadows surrounding the child. 5 purebred German shepherds, as large as wolves, stood in an arc, sheltering their mistress from the rain and wind. 4 of them bared their fangs, their hackles raised, growling menacingly at the stranger. The leader of the pack, a one-eyed male with a long scar across its face, took a step forward. It did not bark. It looked at Tom. Its gaze held no predatory ferocity, but rather the deep sorrow and plea of a soldier seeking reinforcements. His name was Kaiser, and he knew the man before him was their last hope. Mister. The girl's voice was a fractured whisper, drowned out by the rain. She held out a tiny hand, tightly clutching a blood-soaked dog collar. My mom. Mom Sarah won't wake up. She told me to find the Tin Soldier. She said you would know what to do. The name, Tin Soldier, and the bloody collar were like a splash of cold water in Tom's face. Sarah, the only woman in this remote border area who knew his past, was in danger. 3 kilometers. Only 3 kilometers through the forest, but on this stormy night, it was the line between life and death. Someone bad was hunting her. Tom took a step back, intending to slam the door shut. He was afraid. He was afraid of blood, afraid of responsibility, and most of all, afraid of seeing another dog fall for him. The cowardice of man who had given up surged powerfully. But just as the door was about to close, a smaller shadow detached itself from the pack. It was Luna, the only female. She dragged her injured leg to the crack of the door, not barking, not biting, but nudging her cold, wet muzzle into Tom's trembling hand. She licked it softly, a lick full of trust, entrusting the lives of the entire pack to a stranger. The sensation was exactly like Radar years ago. The warmth from that rough tongue ran down Tom's spine, awakening the sleeping beast in his chest. He realized he could run from the past, but he could not run from his conscience. Tom stood silent for 3 seconds. 3 seconds for the old man to die and the soldier to live again. He threw the door wide open, turned his back, and strode inside, kicking the bottle of liquor into the corner. The sound of shattering glass mingled with the thunder. Tom pulled a dust-covered wooden chest from under the bed. Click! The lid sprang open, and the pungent smell of gun oil wafted out. He put on a tattered poncho, tucked the dagger into his belt, and grabbed the sleek black rifle. When Tom stepped back onto the porch, the slumped posture of the drunkard was gone. He stood straight, his eyes sharp and cold, staring into the pitch-black night. He looked down at the one-eyed dog, giving an order in the forgotten, crisp tone he hadn't used for half a decade. I will take your mistress. Kaiser, lead the way. The lead dog let out a low growl, its tail whipping the air. The whole pack turned instantly, darting into the darkness like black arrows, guiding the way for the journey of blood and tears that had just begun. The rain lashed his face, stinging like 1,000 needles, and the mud underfoot was mushy, ready to swallow anyone who slipped. The formation was established so naturally that the former soldier shuddered in astonishment. Kaiser, the one-eyed dog, led the point, its keen nose slicing through the downpour to analyze every scent molecule in the air. 10 meters ahead, appearing like a phantom, was Scout. The youngest dog in the pack took the position of forward scout, moving without a sound, gliding past the stinging nettles like a wisp of smoke. On the flanks, Duke and Tank lumbered forward, muscles rippling beneath their soaked fur, their vigilant eyes constantly sweeping left and right. They were mobile steel walls, protecting the center of the formation. Tom and the little girl Nana, who was walking closely by Luna's side. No barking, no unnecessary growling. This level of discipline was impossible for house pets. This was the work ethic of a special operations unit. Tom watched the way Kaiser would stop and wait whenever Nana stumbled, and then resume moving when she got up, and he suddenly understood something. Sarah hadn't raised them as companions. In this lawless borderland, she had trained them to be warriors, bodyguards ready to fight to the death to protect their family. And tonight, Tom was the temporary commander of that unit. After traversing about 1 kilometer, Scout suddenly halted. It didn't turn its head, just lowered its center of gravity, its ears pressed back against its head, and its tail stiffly extended. High-level danger alert. Tom immediately raised his right fist high, signaling stop. The entire pack, as if programmed by a single mind, simultaneously dropped to the mud, blending into the dark night. Tom crouched down, shielding Nana, his hand gripping the rifle tightly. He squinted through the curtain of rain. Ahead, by the dry stream bed, the flickering light of a cigarette tip betrayed the enemy's position. 2 men in hooded rain gear, with submachine guns slung over their shoulders, stood guard beneath an old oak tree. They were mercenaries, professionals hired to clean up the scene. The rain muffled their footsteps, but the smell of cheap tobacco could not fool the dog's sense of smell. Tom knew he couldn't fire. The sound of a gun now would alert the entire forest, and Sarah at the ranger station would pay the price. He had to take them down in silence. Tom turned to Kaiser, then looked at the 2 soldiers, his hand making a sign across his throat. A ruthless but necessary command. Eliminate. Kaiser understood. It turned to Duke, nudging its comrades shoulder lightly. The 2 four-legged monsters separated from the formation, crawling over the wet, decaying leaves. They did not charge directly. They split into 2 directions, circling behind the enemy, using the thunder to conceal their presence. Tom held his breath, watching. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. A clap of thunder roared across the sky. In that exact moment, 2 black shadows leaped from the bushes. No warning bark. Duke sprang up, its razor-sharp teeth clamping down on the gun-holding wrist of the soldier on the left, pulling hard, sending him off balance and sprawling backward. Simultaneously, Kaiser launched himself into the air, the 45-kilogram animal's pounce aimed straight at the other man's throat. The scream was choked off in the windpipe. There was only the dry crack of breaking bone and the desperate thrashing on the muddy ground. The ambush took less than 5 seconds. When Tom walked over, the 2 soldiers lay motionless. Duke and Tank stood guard beside the corpses, panting heavily, but their eyes remained sharp, awaiting the next command. Tom checked the pulses of the 2 soldiers. Dead. He looked at the pack with a mix of respect and horror. They hadn't ripped and torn randomly. They attacked the most fatal weak points. Clean, efficient, brutal. Move on, Tom commanded, his voice ice cold. There was no time for sympathy for the enemy. The journey continued, but the atmosphere grew heavy. The pungent smell of gasoline began to seep into their nostrils, overpowering even the smell of rain. The ranger station was right ahead. When the wooden house appeared behind the pine trees, Tom's heart constricted. The old log cabin stood isolated in an open clearing, surrounded by 3 pickup trucks boxed in. Headlights from the vehicles shone directly onto the front door, creating a stage of death. For other soldiers were moving around, carrying jerrycans of gasoline. They were dousing the house with fuel. They intended to burn Sarah alive along with all the evidence inside. Tom pulled Nana back behind a large rock. He crouched down, looking directly into the girl's eyes, his voice stern but unable to hide his worry. "Listen to me, kid. You have to stay here with Luna. Absolutely do not come out until I return. Do not scream, no matter what you hear. Understood?" Nana nodded, tears welling up, but her lips pressed tightly shut. Luna, as if understanding, curled up around the girl, using her body heat to warm her mistress, her brown eyes looking at Tom, as if to say, "Go on. I'll take care of things here." Tom nodded a silent farewell to his four-legged companion, then signaled Kaiser, Duke, Tank, and Scout. It was time for bullets and blood. He checked his magazine. Enough rounds. Tom took a deep breath. The smell of gunpowder he thought he had forgotten rushed back, stimulating every nerve for battle. He was no longer the drunkard Thomas Graves. He was a killing machine trained by the military. Attack! Tom rushed out from behind the rock, his rifle spitting fire. The two soldiers holding the jerrycans of gasoline fell instantly in the first burst of shots. The flowing gasoline mingled with pools of blood. The element of surprise had worked. But the mercenaries were not amateurs. After a moment of shock, the remaining men immediately took cover behind the pickup trucks and returned fire fiercely. Bullets ripped through the rain, embedding themselves in tree trunks, plowing up the ground around Tom. "Duke, Tank, left flank, Scout, right flank," Tom yelled over the gunfire. The three dogs shot off like black lightning. They did not charge into the muzzle flashes. They weaved under the vehicles, leaped over the hoods, attacking the enemy's blind spots. A shrill scream erupted as Scout bit viciously into the ankle of a man hiding behind a wheel, dragging him down to expose the target for Tom to finish off. Tom provided cover fire while moving quickly toward the main door of the house. He kicked the wooden door open. Inside, Sarah lay unconscious on the cold floor, a spreading pool of blood near her hip. Standing right beside her was a large man, the commander. He wasn't holding a gun, but a long, military dagger. Seeing Tom, he smirked, kicking Sarah hard, making her groan in pain. "You're too late, tin soldier," the man growled. Tom aimed his gun at the man's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. Click! The dry sound of the firing pin hitting an empty chamber echoed like the hammer of death striking Tom's heart. Out of ammo. In the chaos outside, he had emptied the only magazine he brought. The commander realized it immediately. He laughed loudly, a savage, maniacal laugh, and charged with terrifying speed. The dagger in his hand was aimed straight at Tom's heart. The distance was too close. Tom dropped the rifle, trying to draw the knife from his hip, but he knew he was a beat too slow. Age and alcohol had eroded his reflexes. Death appeared starkly before his eyes, as cold as the steel blade rushing towards him. But he had forgotten one thing. He was not fighting alone. From behind Tom, a massive black shadow leaped over his head. Kaiser. The lead dog had followed Tom into the house without him realizing it. Seeing his owner in danger, the guardian instinct surged more powerfully than the fear of death. It did not bite the arm, nor the leg. It used its entire body weight to ram the commander's chest, shoving him away from Tom. Bang! It wasn't Tom's gun. The commander, in the moment of attack, had pulled out the pistol hidden in his coat and fired by reflex. The bullet did not hit Tom. It lodged straight into Kaiser's left shoulder. The gunshot deafened the confined space. The dog's massive body jerked mid-air and then hit the wooden floor with a thud. Fresh blood splattered. Kaiser whimpered in agonizing pain, his legs twitching, but as one good eye remained wide open, glaring at the enemy. His fangs still bared threateningly. Time seemed to stop in Tom's eyes. The image of radar from years ago superimposed itself on the current image of Kaiser. Blood, gunfire, sacrifice. Again, another comrade falling right before his eyes because of his helplessness. No, not this time. A sound unlike a human's roar erupted from Tom's chest. It was the roar of a cornered beast, the roar of regret and fury suppressed for 5 long years. All reason vanished. Only the killer instinct remained. Tom lunged at the commander before the man could recover from the impact. Tom didn't use technique. He used the raw force of madness. He head-butted the other man's nose. The sound of crushed cartilage was sharp and distinct. As the soldier fell backward, Tom climbed onto him, his left hand gripping the throat tightly, his right hand drawing the dagger from his belt. There was no mercy, no warning. For the dog, Tom hissed through clenched teeth. The knife plunged in with a thud. The fight was over. The room fell into a deadly silence. Outside, the gunfire had also ceased. Scout, Duke, and Tank had cleared out the remaining hostiles. They rushed into the house, surrounding Kaiser, who was lying on the pool of blood, breathing his last. Tom scrambled to his feet, his hands still trembling from adrenaline and lingering rage. He tossed the knife aside and knelt beside Kaiser. The lead dog lay on its side, its breath rattling and intermittent, blood oozing from the shoulder wound, soaking its black fur. "Kaiser!" Tom called out, his voice choked. He pressed his hand firmly on the wound, trying to stop the flow of blood. "Hold on. You can't die. I forbid you to die." Kaiser weakly opened its remaining eye and looked at Tom. Its tail tapped the floor softly, weakly but clearly. Then, with a phenomenal will that only the most loyal of dogs possess, it struggled to prop itself up on its front legs. It didn't care about the bullet wound. It turned its head to the door, where Luna was leading Nana. It wanted to stand up. It wanted to greet its little mistress. It wanted to say, "Mission complete. Mistress is safe." Kaiser dragged itself forward inch by inch, pulling its injured leg across the wooden floor, leaving a long, crimson trail of blood. As Nana burst through the door, sobbing hysterically upon seeing her mother lying there, Kaiser had just managed to reach the girl's side. It licked Nana's small foot softly, then rested its head against her shoe and closed its eye. Its breathing grew faint, but the animal's face held a strangely serene expression. Tom watched the scene, hot tears streaming down his weather-beaten cheeks. He understood that tonight he was not the hero. The real hero was lying at the girl's feet, with a bullet in his shoulder and a heart more loyal than any human he had ever met. The wooden room, smelling of blood and gunpowder, slowly sank into an unusual quiet, broken only by the sporadic drumming of rain on the tin roof. Typhoon number 7 was retreating, taking its savagery with it, leaving a bleak but hopeful dawn on the horizon. Tom knelt beside Kaiser, his hands that had once been stained with the enemy's blood now shaking as they performed the most precise first-aid procedures. He ripped his shirt sleeve, pouring the last packet of military hemostatic powder onto the bullet wound in the dog's shoulder. Kaiser let out a faint oof sound in its throat, its entire body twitching slightly with pain, but it absolutely did not bare its teeth or resist. It understood this man was saving him. "Good boy, rookie. You're stubborn. You know that?" Tom whispered, his voice hoarse, sweat mixed with blood streaming down the bridge of his nose. The bullet went through the soft tissue, missed the shoulder blade. "You got a big life force." He bandaged the wound tightly, immobilizing the animal's shoulder joint. Nearby, Luna was still licking Nana's pale face, while Scout, Duke, and Tank lay prostrate in a protective circle, their eyes still vigilantly watching the door, even though the enemy was completely eliminated. Sarah had woken up slightly after Tom gave her an antibiotic injection and fluids from the emergency kit. She managed to turn her head to look at Tom, then at the panting Kaiser. "Thank you, Tom," she whispered, her eyes full of gratitude. "You came. They brought me," Tom replied curtly, his eyes never leaving the bandage on Kaiser's shoulder. "You've raised real warriors, Sarah." A chopping sound tore through the wind from afar, growing louder, drowning out the distant thunder. The extremely bright headlights swept through the window, illuminating the dark room. The rescue helicopter had arrived. It was a civilian helicopter specially chartered from the weather station. The only thing that could fly in these conditions, thanks to a satellite phone call Tom made before leaving his cabin. The downdraft from the rotor blades flattened the surrounding trees, splashing water and debris everywhere. The ranger station door burst open, and two paramedics in bright orange reflective gear rushed in with a stretcher. We received an emergency signal. Who is injured? One staff member shouted to overcome the engine noise. The woman and the dog. Tom stood up, directing decisively. The woman has an infection fever and soft tissue trauma. The dog has a bullet wound. The paramedics quickly put Sarah on the stretcher. Nana cried hysterically, clutching her mother's hand, her small legs running after the stretcher out into the yard. But the real trouble began when they reached the helicopter landing area. The terrible noise of the rotor blades and the strong, swirling wind caused the pack of dogs to panic. To the animals, the giant, roaring iron monster was a threat. Duke and Tank began barking furiously, charging to block the paramedics, baring their fangs, not allowing them to take Sarah. Scout ran around Nana, trying to push the girl back into the house. "Step back. It's dangerous," the paramedic shouted, fearfully retreating from the agitated animals. "We can't take her up if the dogs are like this. We are not authorized to transport unmuzzled animals." The situation turned chaotic. Nana wailed, calling the dogs names. Kaiser, despite the pain, struggled to stand up, dragging himself on three legs, intending to rush out, driven by the instinct to protect the pack. Tom knew he had to act. If he didn't move fast, Sarah's life would be in danger, and the dogs might be refused transport by the pilot, or worse, tranquilized. He stepped out into the swirling wind, standing between the helicopter and the dogs. His shadow stretched long on the muddy ground, looming like a mountain. "Quiet." Tom's shout rang out like an explosion, powerful and sharp, piercing even the noise of the engine. The dogs froze. Duke and Tank stopped barking, their ears flattened. Scout stopped running. Luna looked up at him. Even Kaiser, lying flat by the door, lifted its head. Tom walked right up to Duke, the most agitated dog. He didn't crouch down to pet it. He looked directly into its eyes, the gaze of a true pack leader, the alpha. "Your mission here is over," Tom said, his voice low but still weighted. He pointed toward the waiting helicopter. "Let them take your mistress. She needs a doctor." Nana ran to hug Tom's legs, tears streaming down her face. "Mister, let Kaiser go too. I won't leave them behind." Tom bent down, placing his large hands on the girl's shoulders, squeezing gently to reassure her. "Listen to me, Nana. There's not enough room in the helicopter. Kaiser is injured, and the altitude pressure will make him bleed more. I will take care of him." Then he turned to look at the pack of dogs, one by one. He transmitted his calmness and commitment as a soldier to them. "Stay put," Tom commanded, his hand raised definitively. "I will take you all home. I promise. On a soldier's honor." There was an invisible communication between the man and the animals. They sensed the sincerity and authority in his voice. They knew this man had just fought alongside them. He was not an enemy. He was a comrade. Duke and Tank slowly backed away, sitting down on the ground. Scout also settled down next to Luna. They watched the stretcher being lifted into the cabin, their eyes sad but obedient. The helicopter door closed. The aircraft lifted off the ground, banked, and soared toward the gray sky that was beginning to lighten. Tom stood there, watching until the helicopter was just a small speck. The wind stopped blowing. The rain had completely ceased. The air became absolutely still. He turned back. 5 pairs of eyes were still staring at him, waiting. Kaiser lay there, blood seeping through the bandage, but his breathing was more regular. Tom let out a long sigh, shedding the entire burden of the night. He walked over and gently lifted Kaiser into his arms. The dog, weighing over 40 kilograms, lay docilely in his strong embrace. "Let's go home, boys and girls," Tom said softly. "It's a long way back." And so, under the faint light of the dawning sun, piercing through the ancient forest, a strange troop began their journey back. A man carrying an injured dog, followed by 4 loyal bodyguards, trudged back along the path of death they had just crossed. 3 kilometers back was no longer a haunting nightmare, but the road leading to rebirth. 6 months later, the harsh winter of the borderland had retreated, giving way to a summer of brilliant golden sunshine. The ancient forest no longer had a gloomy, deadly appearance, but instead was the fresh green color of thriving life. Tom's wooden cabin on the hillside was transformed. It was no longer the dark, cluttered lair of a drunkard. The roof had been securely fixed, the wooden walls polished brightly. In front of the porch, bright yellow wildflowers swayed in the wind, and a brand-new wooden swing had been built near the old oak tree. On the lush green lawn, the crisp laughter of a child rang out. Nana, in a blue floral dress, was running and jumping, holding a red plastic frisbee. "Catch this, Scout." "Duke." The girl threw the disc, soaring through the air. Immediately, 2 black shadows chased after it like arrows. Scout, with its usual agility, leaped into the air and snapped the disc up before it hit the ground, while Duke ran around barking excitedly. On the porch, Sarah was sitting in a rocking chair, holding a book, but her eyes were fixed on her daughter with a gentle smile. She had fully recovered, her complexion healthy, her hair neatly tied back. The wound from that day was now just a faint scar, a memory of the fateful night that changed their lives. At her feet, Luna was napping, occasionally wagging her tail to shoo away flies, enjoying the rare peace. Tom walked out of the kitchen, carrying a tray of cool, iced lemonade. He was no longer wearing his old, tattered military clothes. Tom wore a simple white t-shirt and khaki pants. His beard and mustache were cleanly shaved, revealing an angular face that was less gaunt. His eyes no longer stared into the void, but shone with the joy of the present. He put the tray down on the table, then stepped down the porch stairs. There, where the most beautiful sunlight shone, Kaiser was basking in the sun. The lead dog was still as large and majestic as ever, but on its left shoulder, the solid black fur was interrupted by a long, pale pink scar where the bullet had once passed through. The scar did not make him less handsome. On the contrary, it was like a medal, a badge of courage that any warrior would be proud of. Seeing Tom approach, Kaiser lifted his head, his ears erect. He no longer needed to stand up to greet him in a military ritual. He just thumped his large, fluffy tail softly against the wooden floor. Tom sat down on the step beside the dog. He used his calloused hand, the hand that had once only known how to pull a trigger, to gently rub the scar on Kaiser's shoulder. "Does it still ache when the weather changes, old friend?" Tom asked quietly, as if talking to a confidant. Kaiser gave a low grunt, nudging his large head into Tom's hand, his tongue licking softly at Tom's wrist. Tom smiled. He looked out the lawn, where Nana was giggling while hugging Tank's neck, then looked over at Sarah, who was sipping lemonade and waving at him. A warm, strange, but incredibly comfortable feeling spread through his chest, a place that had previously only contained coldness and alcohol. He recalled the stormy night 6 months ago. That night, he thought he was the one who saved this family. He thought he had done them a favor, sacrificed his own tranquility to save their lives. But now, under this brilliant golden sunshine, Tom realized he was wrong. Sleeping pills had not saved him from the nightmares of war. Bottles of whiskey had not drowned the loneliness gnawing at his soul. Isolation from the world had not brought him peace. It was these dogs, these 4-legged creatures who couldn't speak human words but understood his heart, who were the true saviors. Kaiser had jumped out to take the bullet for him, not just to save his physical life, but to mend the deep emotional wound from Radar's death years ago. He gave Tom a second chance to make amends, to protect, to feel useful again. Nana and Sarah had brought laughter and family warmth into this house, dispelling the ghost of the past. This pack of German shepherds did not come here seeking food or shelter. They came as black-furred angels, leading the old ex-soldier out of the lonely grave he had dug for himself. "Tom," Nana's bright voice cut through his thoughts. "Come play with us. Kaiser wants to play too." Tom looked up. Kaiser had stood up some time before. It looked at him with its one remaining bright eye. its tail wagging furiously, cocking its head toward the lawn as if to say, "Come on, comrade. The fight is over. Now is the time to live." "Coming," Tom replied, his voice resounding and cheerful. He stood up, brushed the dust off his pants, and ran out to the lawn with Kaiser, blending into the laughter of his new family. The ghosts of the past finally faded, giving way to an eternal summer in the border forest. And there, the story of the 3 kilometers of loyalty concluded, but a new journey, the journey of love and healing, had just begun.